Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class is going to be on the next set of chapters for Forging the Darksword, chapters 6 through 10. So we are still at the beginning of this series. We're still at the beginning of this book, so I hope that you are enjoying things so far, and as we're ramping up and getting going, hopefully you are invested to find out what happens, because this book series is really, really interesting, and I really, really like it a lot. So hopefully you are also enjoying it and ready to discuss a little bit more about it. So let's go ahead and just jump right in with our recap and get going. This set of chapters is not super crazy or have like major events, I feel like, really taking place. It seems a little bit more mundane and maybe a little bit slower set of chapters, but these are very important chapters, and I think a lot of interesting things do happen that we need to know for later in the story. So we start off where we left off in chapter 5, where Saryan is traveling to Marilyn, I think is how you would say that name, Marilyn, for the royal birth. So they're traveling, the bishop is there, a couple other people are there traveling, and they get to Marilyn, and after 10 days of the baby being born, they finally are able to do the test. And the bishop the test begins, and Saryan is helping with that test, but the baby ends up failing all 3 of the tests that they use to see if they have magic. So there's a problem there. And the bishop ends up taking that baby and brings it to the font in order to commence with the death watch. Saryan is still in the city, and he is doing tests for other noble kids, and many of them have been failing the test. And this is causing a lot of problems, especially since it seems to be mostly the nobles that are having problems with their births, not the rest of the population. And then we see a noble named Anja, who is out way away from the big city of Marilyn, where all the nobles are supposed to live, and she goes to a field to become a field worker. She ends up asking to become a field worker, and she has her baby with her. And so even though she is technically royalty, they take her in and allow her to work there in the fields. And we see years go by, and Joram, the baby, is growing up. He is being kept separated from the other kids, but he is growing up and finding out that he is different in some way. He ends up getting jealous even of the other kids, and I'm not jealous of them to be able to use magic and to fly and all this other stuff and have fun, and ends up lashing out toward his mother. So Anja ends up taking him all the way to the borderlands in order to see his father, who has gone through the turning and is now a stone statue. When they come back, she ends up telling him the story of how his father became a stone statue and their love story, and she ends up telling that to him night after night after night. Until finally, when he's 7, she decides to start teaching him sleight of hand magic tricks in order to fool everybody else. That makes it seem like he actually does have magic instead of being dead. And the fact that we have come to the conclusion, by ourselves at least, that he is a dead child. Dead as in no magic. So she is teaching him sleight of hand in order to preserve the look that he has magic and will not be found out. And when he is 8, he starts working in the fields like everyone else, and he's using that sleight of hand in order to not be found out. At the age of 15, he finally learns from his friend Mosiah what it actually means to be dead, as well as what technology is and how it is forbidden, and how being dead is not allowed either. So he kind of now has this startling realization of exactly who and what he is, and kind of freaks out a little bit about it, and he ends up wanting to go to the Outland and talk to the people that are there. So It's kind of interesting as we stop right at the end of this chapter with the mention of this outland that we have not heard of before now. Like, we knew there was space beyond that, but they always keep saying like, oh, there's nothing beyond where the field magi are. So it's interesting now that we know that there is such a thing as the outland and that there are people who live out there. So we'll see in the future what that means and where they're going to go from there, but it's definitely interesting that we leave this set of chapters kind of right on the cusp of learning something new that we didn't know before. So again, nothing crazy, exciting happening in these stories or in these chapters. It's just learning about Joram, who we are setting up to be obviously an important character, and seeing how he's growing up and what his life has been like to the point of age 15. So the first topic I want to discuss with you is going to be world building. Because we're still at the beginning of the series, we're still at the beginning of this particular book, we are still building this world and we're still setting up the precedents of like, this is what can happen, this is what can't happen, this is how this culture is living and surviving. So we're still building up to having a true understanding of what we're getting into here with this world and the people who live in it. So the first thing that we're looking at in these chapters is the test for life with a capital L. And the fact that, does a kid have magic when it's born? Because as we've already found out, any person or any being that doesn't have magic is not technically alive and is not allowed to exist in this world. So it's pretty interesting because the test they mentioned to me originally when we're talking about this test in the first set of chapters seemed like this obviously can happen to where they don't have magic, because they're talking about how it can't exist and they have to then deal with the fact that get rid of anybody who doesn't have magic and like can't allow anybody who does the practicing of technology. So it seems like it comes up and they deal with it then. But then in these chapters, we actually learn that at least at this point, maybe not at the beginning when they first moved here per se, but at least at this point, all of the tests are kind of more a formality than necessary. They like really nobody fails the test. It's just a formality just to make sure that everything is as it should be. And so that was really interesting addition to it, is like, not only is this something that's happening that's bad because obviously it's the emperor and empress's child, but also it's bad because like it's unheard of for this to happen. Like, what do you actually do at this point if it does happen, because it's never happened? Which is what the problem that the bishop comes up to, is like, what do I do? Like, this has never been the case. And especially because he's read the prophecy that's been passed down from bishop to bishop about a royal that's going to be born, quote, quote, dead. So this is a very monumentous occasion, because not only because of whose child it is, but because no child in at least a very long time has ever had this problem. And I also think it's super interesting that these tests happen after 10 days old. The baby does have to be 10 days old before they can perform the tests. Otherwise, the baby is not strong enough to complete them. So this baby's actually been around for more than just a couple hours. So obviously the empress can become attached to her baby very, very easily. Obviously, it's shown that the baby is alive in the fact that it can breathe and act and think. It's not like it's a stillborn baby. It is a living, breathing baby. And it's been treated and it's been cared for and it's been loved for 10 whole days. That's a week and a half. And so you really are already cementing this baby in their hearts before they take this test and find out that they can't have their baby anymore. And then also that there are 3 tests that are given in order to be sure that the baby has magic. And I find it very interesting that the baby can fail one test, depending on what kind of magic they have. One of the 3 of the tests might be failed, but it will never be the case that more than one fails. So, super, super interesting that depending on what kind of magic, one can be not quite as strong in their abilities in something for the 3 tests. But once you fail 2, then it's basically you don't have any magic. So, especially because for me, I was thinking like once they failed, the baby failed the first test, they were going to be like panicking then and be like, no, I can't fail. But really, they weren't panicking at first because they're like, okay, the baby might fail the first test, and that's normal if they don't have affinity for certain magics, if they have affinity for other magics. And then the second one, that's when they start really being concerned. And they did provide all 3 tests anyway, even though it was pretty much certain after the first 2 that the baby was going to be, quote, quote, dead, or capital D, dead. So we're learning a little bit more about those tests, a little bit more about how it's performed. We got to actually witness it being performed on the Emperor's baby. So that was super interesting, as well as the background information we got on those tests. Next, we get some more idea of what the turning is. So the turning is kind of like jail, a more horrible version of jail in some people's regards, or a different version of killing somebody. Maybe that would be a better comparison, because they basically have decided that people who transgress against anything, they don't believe in killing other people. They don't believe in harming human beings. So, in order to do a punishment that is basically death anyway, they decide to, instead of killing you, they make you do this agonizing turn to stone, where you on the inside are still alive, and you still can think, you can still, feel the wind on you, you can still be aware of your surroundings, but you are a stone statue that has to weather the weather. 2 different kinds of weathers, but it sounds like I'm saying the same thing. You have to weather the storms that are coming from, just being outside, the wind that's whipping around, dust, rain, anything like that. You just have to endure being solid stone, unable to move, and just gazing out into eternity for eternity. So it's really actually pretty horrific punishment to give somebody, to sentence them to this particular end. And obviously, because now that they're stone, they're going to likely to have a longer lifetime than a regular person would, because they can last longer periods of time as a stone statue than maybe a person would with, getting sick and getting old. So eventually they'll crumble to dust, likely, because all things do end up crumbling to dust, but it could take eons before you get to that point, depending on what the weather conditions are like. And it's pretty interesting also that the statues can still cry, because we did have the moment when Joram and Anja went to see Joram's dad as a statue, and the statue started crying. So it is still able to hear, it's still able to think, you're still able to do everything, and even can shed tears, but you are just forever trapped as a stone statue, which is pretty horrible punishment. I mean, in some ways I feel like death is a kinder thing to do than to do that for somebody, but that is how they deal with people who break the rules, and it's a very harsh, scary punishment indeed. Obviously there are people that still break the rules. I don't think that there's any kind of way to guarantee that nobody would, especially if they think they can get away with it not be caught, but I do feel like that probably deters a lot of people. Okay, so next let's go ahead and talk about the tone and the building of unrest in these chapters. So we start off at the beginning, just kind of figuring out the past for Saryan. We figure out where he's at in his life right now. We kind of are just beginning this plot with some background information and some general world building and stuff like that. We're just kind of setting the scene and setting up the tone for the beginning. Here, we're actually getting a look at the society, and we're interacting a little bit more with the actual society that people live in. And these noble babies, after the first baby was tested to be dead, a lot of the noble babies are being born dead. And the church is taking those babies and doing the death watch, which basically means that they're probably killing them or sending them into the font or something other that is going to make it so the baby is not around anymore. So we see this frequency of these babies that are being taken. That's never happened before. And all these nobles are becoming very upset because their children are being taken from them. And it's not just one here or there, it's a lot of them. They are even smuggling them out because obviously these parents really love their kids and don't want to give them up when they are a living, breathing baby. And there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with them except for these tests are magically saying that they have no magic. But that's the case, is that they are being born without the affinity to do magic. Or maybe it's that they have the affinity to do death magic, which is technology. And so we're really seeing a building of this unrest, of this festeringness that's kind of coming up in society. So before they didn't have this, but now in these chapters we're seeing this society change. At least with the nobles and the upper class, there's a change that is slowly occurring that will be important as we move forward, because a society that is not happy is not going to necessarily follow the rules anymore, just like the parents that are smuggling out their kids if they do their own tests and find that their baby is not going to pass. So the church is not in a good light right now. You know, originally when we were starting off, we talk about how the church is everything. It is the highest power. It is what everybody looks up to. It's going to be the body that's making the rules. Like, the church is holy and the church is what they worship and everything. Like, it's bigger than life, which is what a church is supposed to be for a lot of people. But now they're getting mad at the church, and now they are getting frustrated with the people who are part of the church and the people who are taking them. So we see that the church is no longer being viewed in a happy light, which is going to cause problems when the church is also supposed to be the rule makers. And again, this is causing more unrest and more people not wanting to follow the rules. Plus, people are just scared. People have never had this happen before. The tests are something that never fails, and now it seems like everybody's failing it. And what does that mean for their society as a whole as well? If there's no babies that are passing being born, especially not noble ones, is the structure of the world going to come crumbling down? And what does it mean for, all the people who are having kids? Like, are they never going to be able to have kids? Are they always going to be producing a child that's going to be considered quote, quote, dead? So it's super, super interesting that we're already seeing this shift. So we already had an expectation of what life was like at the first set of chapters. And now we're seeing that this one event that then trickled in a whole bunch of other events to follow suit is now causing a stir up in society and causing a change that we will hopefully continue to understand and to see how that will roll out in the future chapters. All right, so next let's go ahead and talk about one of the most important topics, I think, for this section, and that is Joram. So Joram is being set up to be a very important character. So it is important that we talk about him. And the fact that he's being set up as an important character is the fact that we are seeing him literally grow up. We are really spending time understanding where he came from, who he is, and why he might make the choices that he's going to make. So we are really setting him up to be understood by the reader in order to see why he makes the choices that he makes, or why things happen to him in the future of this story. So the authors are really pinpointing him and saying, we need to understand exactly where he came from, exactly where, how he grew up, exactly, you know, what has been done to him and what he's been taught in order to understand later moments in time. So we are seeing his childhood right now and how it is being shaped and how he is being shaped and molded by this childhood that he's had, and what experiences he's gone through. So he's been very, very isolated, which we as the reader understand why, because he has no magic, and you know, if anybody finds out, then they're going to take him away, and that's going to be really, really hard for Anja. And also, you know, we won't have much of a story if one of the main characters is just taken out. But so he's been very, very isolated, and he's been very much kept to himself. He's been locked in his house day after day as a little kid. He's only has his mother to have any kind of company or any kind of teaching, has literally nothing else for reference or contact or anything. So he really wanted to before join in, obviously, because he's lonely and wants to have friends and it looks like fun and all the other reasons that a kid wants to go out and play. But now, ever since Anja showed him his dad and has told him this story, he pretty much looks down on all the other kids and all the other people. He's really has very much of a snooty, entitled attitude now, and the fact that he knows that, you know, other people have not been very kind to him and his family. So that's where he's now kind of being shaped and molded into being kind of resentful towards other people in general, especially those that have magic. And at this point, everybody has magic. So we kind of already see now why he's why as he's growing up, he's becoming more resentful and more like pulling away from people is because of his isolation and what he has been told about people in this world. You know, his only real interactions were with his mom and what she has to tell him about things. So he has learned sleight of hand at this point. He has learned how to hide the fact that he doesn't have any magic. Not that Anja ever explained to him why he doesn't have magic or the importance of him not having magic. She just teaches him like, hey, you have to make sure nobody finds out. We want to pretend that you have magic because that way when you develop it, you know, you can go on and you'll be good to go and no one will have suspected anything. And made it more of a pride kind of context for him. The pride of like, oh, you know, you don't want to show weakness. You want to be like the same as everybody else. But now he at least knows how to hide who he is and what he is, even if, you know, at this young age, he didn't understand why he had to do it. But he does follow through. It's never like he just thinks that nobody will notice or that it's not a big deal. He does make sure to continue doing that. So he's basically fooling everybody into thinking that he has magic. And I think he himself doesn't want to be seen as different anyway. Though he does kind of sneer at everybody else. So maybe he doesn't care about it all that much. But I feel like in some ways he doesn't really want to stick out in that way. It's a big shaper or a big shaper of who he is in the fact that he was shown that stone statue of his dad. That was a turning point for him. You could really tell that once Anja slapped him, dragged him over there, took him to that statue, he was like broken in a way. Like something inside him broke. The defiance that he had, the will that he had to try and explore and to try and push himself to be like other people and to have magic and to care about other people and to want to be included with other people, that all just kind of snapped and he just can't take it anymore. He's very much a hurt child in the fact of his treatment and the fact of Anja telling him about how horrible people can be, and that's really his only reference that he has, the isolation that he's had. This is the moment where he snapped and things can't go back to the way they were. He can't think of it in the same way anymore. So that was a really, really important part, or really important moment for Joram in his childhood. Now, the next thing that I think is really important for him is when Mosiah tells him at age 15 what it means for technology, to what technology is, and to talk about what being dead means. Because he obviously knows that he's dead in the way that he described, not having magic, and the fact that him just wanting to roll a stone is like a forbidden thing because he was trying to use a stick to do it. For the fact that he didn't actually understand that being dead meant that you were meant to be, forbidden to exist. So this is a really big thing. Like, he finally understands that this world is not accepting him fully. Like, it's not just this area around him. It's not just Anja, and it's not just these people right here where she's saying like, oh, they're not going to accept you. They fear you. Like, she does have these moments, and she does tell him to caution him, but she doesn't ever explain that really his existence is illegal. That, that he will be killed if they find out about him. Not just punished, or not just, maybe thrown out of the field area that they're at, but seriously, like, killed. And probably his mom too. So this is a really important moment, because this is like another snapping moment where it's like, he perks up and he's like, oh my gosh, like, what are you talking about? And he finds out that literally his existence is illegal, that he really should not exist ever. And that it is a really important distinction that they all can't find out about who he is. So I feel like that was another moment that was very, very harsh for him, especially because it was not his mother who told him, it was his friend. The friend that he, kind of mostly ignores, but cares about having anyway. So he's had a very, very hard, grueling childhood, and he does have these fits of lethargy where he just can't even get up and move. It sounds a lot to me like depression, which makes sense in the way that he's been treated and the way that he's had to grow up. It's no wonder that he would have depression, and to have anxiety, and to have a lot of harsh, negative feelings about his life and about life in general. So it's a very dark upbringing, and it's a very dark tone that we have right now, and we're really going to see how later these moments are going to shape him and drive him toward wherever he is going in his journey in life. Now let's go ahead and talk about Anja. So Anja is important because she has a huge part in shaping Joram and being a big factor in how he's going to be when he grows up. She was not a loving mom. She was a very frantic mom, or a very obsessive mom, but she was not a loving and caring mom. She loved him. I do truly feel that she loves him, but she's not somebody that can show that love, at least not in a way that is presented as loving. I mean, she even slaps him, she drags him around, she yells at him. She doesn't nicely explain anything to him. She's obsessed with, keeping him secret. She's obsessed with keeping him locked up. And we do understand the reasoning for that. I mean, obviously, she doesn't want them finding him, but she doesn't cuddle him. She doesn't, make him feel like he is loved and wanted. Instead, she's very harsh to him. And if he doesn't get something right away, or he tries something that she doesn't like, she is very nasty with him. I feel like that was a big factor in why he was trying to reach out to everybody else. Not because that he wouldn't want to otherwise. I mean, obviously, even if he had a loving mom, he'd still want to go and have friends and still go out and play or whatever and have magic. But I think he was trying to use that also as a way to fill the void of not having a loving, caring mom. Though she did do whatever it took for him. She taught him the sleight of hand. She's working in these fields to keep him. She's doing what is necessary in order for him to survive and for him to be there. So I'm not saying that she's not, doing what's necessary. Like, I'm not saying that she's just abandoning him or anything else. Like, so she does have some good qualities. But the way she treats him is not always the best. And part of that, I think a lot of it actually has to do with the situation of the fact that the man that she loved got turned to stone, and the fact that he is technically not supposed to be alive and that he could be easily taken at any moment. And we do keep getting this mention of the fact that she is kind of mentally degrading over time. She was already a little insane, a little bit mad when she got there and when Joram was a baby. But as time goes on and on, it's like she's just going insaner and slowly just her mind is just degrading into dust. All she can think about is she's very much locked in the past. She's locked in the one moment. And she's not able to the further and further we get from that moment, she's just not able to move forward and is stuck eternally in that moment where I think in a way that her time paused for her. She recognizes that time is moving on, but at the same time, she is very much mentally stuck. And I think that is why she's having a hard time mentally coping as the world progresses and as she is supposed to progress and she can't. So it's very clear that she's not stable. It's very clear that her treatment of Joram was a big factor into having him be so reclusive and so angry and depressed, and to have this inability to function in the society with others. Obviously, again, there are reasons for that, but it's not like she told them about the kindness of the world or the happiness that's in this world. All he knows is the pain and suffering and horribleness of everything that the world has already taken from him at such a young age. So I think Anja's a very interesting character, and we are going to see how long she remains, and the fact that we do see that she's degrading quite quickly at this point, and we don't really know exactly what her role will be in the future, especially since Joram has such a love-hate kind of relationship with her. Okay, so let's go over the nitty-gritty. So I've got 3 different things for us to go ahead and talk about. The first one is that I'm curious as to what the vision showed for the Emperor and Empress when they were approved to get married. Because obviously in order to match them and for them, especially at such a high rank, to get married, they were going to have to do a vision and make sure that they could produce a good child, a child that was going to be alive. But the child that they had was technically dead. So what did the vision show for them to be able to be together? How is that? We don't even talk about it. The bishop doesn't even mention what the vision was, nothing. So I think it's super, super interesting, especially since we do know Anja and the man that she loved was told that they weren't going to produce live children and they couldn't get married. So what did the vision show for the Emperor and Empress? I would just be super fascinated to find out. That's something that I think would be really interesting, is to know if it was a false vision, or if this is technically a one-off. If they had another child, would it be alive? How exactly did they get to this point that it then produced this child? Obviously, we know that there's prophecy, and that's a big part of it, but I just think it'd be interesting to understand exactly what set it up to be at this point where they could get married and could have this baby together. Second is that Saryan still managed to have a reason to stay in Marilyn. So it's not very much fun for him, but the bishop did continue to make it so that way Saryan did not come back to the font. And we will see exactly what role he has moving forward, and the fact that we've already set him up to be an important character. We've already set him up to be different than everybody else. He's obsessed with math. and he has looked at the ninth mystery. He's interested in that ninth mystery and technology, and it is kind of, he's not really the most religious person. He's not really sticking to the rules of the religion and being very clear-minded about where his desires should be and things like that. He's not very much in control like a lot of the other people are, religious or not. But as a catalyst, he's meant to be, part of the actual church, and he's delving into these other things, and yet he has been allowed to continue doing things. He's been to continue being a catalyst and to be out in this world. So it's super interesting that now he is placed in Marilyn, and what that will mean for the future of the story, and what will his road be in the future. And last but not least, in the first set of chapters, we heard of a turning, like from the bishop. They're talking between the bishop and the other catalyst, and talking about how there was a turning for a catalyst who had sex with a woman and had broken that rule. And now that we've read this set of chapters, it's pretty obvious as to which person or which catalyst that was being referred to. It was very clear now that they mentioned that particular turning in order to kind of foreshadow these set of chapters. So it's super interesting and super cool that they kind of set it up and have that little grain in that one chapter, and then moving forward we're like, oh my gosh, we heard about this before. We understand that there was this turning that was happening, and really that was the father of Joram. So super interesting to see how that progressed from something in the background to something that now is important to the story. And we will see if there's going to be more things that will come up that were mentioned kind of in passing and now will then become important to the story. Okay, that is all I have for today. I would love to hear any of your thoughts or feelings about this set of chapters, anything at all, anything about the story in general. I'd just love to have a discussion with you on this book and on the characters and anything else you might think of. So please let me know if you have any thoughts or feelings or questions or anything at all. Any comments, questions, concerns? I'd love to hear about it. So before we go ahead and head out for today's class, let's just go over the trivia question. Last week's question was about a Dragon Lance question. And now I'm not sure if I know the answer of the question myself, because so my question was a true or false question, and the statement that you had to answer whether it was true or false was the gnomes named their mountain as Mount Nevermind. And I've had only true answers. But in my mind, I always thought, and in my mind I still think, that it was really the people of Solomenia who named it Mount Nevermind. And the fact that, they're trying to say what the name of the mountain was, and then they just go, Nevermind. And then it just ended up being called that because the gnomes were amazed that they could just say Nevermind. So I was thinking it was kind of given by the people of Solomenia. But I guess it could also be that the gnomes named it that, and the fact that they were awed by that word and then used it. But in my mind, it was always that the Solomenian people who were like, oh, just never mind, basically unofficially named it that. Like, that was like how it came to be, is the name just came to be because they said never mind, because they didn't want to listen to all of the history of the mountain. So I was thinking the answer was false. But since everybody said true, maybe I am misremembering, or maybe I am, not, maybe it's a little bit more of an ambiguous question than I thought it was. So if you answered true, or if you also have an opinion about this matter, because you know Dragonlance, please let me know if you think that it really is false or if it really is true. I would love to know the answer, because what I thought was kind of a straightforward question now ended up being a little bit more ambiguous, and I'm not even sure if my answer is correct or what I was thinking the answer was correct. So please let me know. I'd be happy to hear about it. And if we decide, if you can let me know about the true or false, that'd be great. Everyone who answered did answer as true, so hopefully you will help me decide on whether that was correct or not. So sorry, that's a little bit of a unusual trivia question. Normally it's a little bit more cut and dry in the fact that there is an answer and I can tell you if you got it right or not. But instead it's turned out to be a little bit of a discussion that we can have, which is not bad either. Hopefully you will go ahead and engage with me on that. If you would like to answer the trivia question yourself and join us, we would love to have you. Go over to the blog, fantasyfictionfanatics.net. On the side, there is, on the desktop version, you'll scroll down just a little bit. On the right-hand side, there will be the way to see the question and answer it. And if you're on mobile, you'll have to scroll almost all the way down, but then you will see the trivia question at the bottom. So hopefully you will play with us, and I'd be happy to see your answers. I always enjoy thinking up the questions and seeing who can get it right. So hopefully you'll join us. And while you're over there, you're more than welcome to check out my content on the blog. I've got some different content about reading and about fantasy in general, different ideas, discussions, book reviews, book recommendations, other kind of recommendations for fantasy content, anything like that. You're also welcome to let me know what you would like to see either on this channel or on that blog. I'd love to hear what you are interested in. If you want more ways to get in contact with me, because down below is not the best place, that's fine. You're more than welcome to contact me on social media. You can find me at Facebook /fantasyfiction1. You can direct message me there, as well as get updates from me, anything else over there, as well as the same thing, pardon me, same thing at Twitter, which is at fantasyfiction1. You can direct message me there or find out updates and other things like that, since I do post on there. And the best place of all is the Discord. If you want to talk with me as well as some of your fellow fantasy fiction fanatics, go ahead and click below with the link and you can join us and we can talk about lots of different things, fantasy and non-fantasy related, but to have a community that all enjoys the same kind of things and can have a discussion together. So I'd love to hear from you there, either through direct message or through the group chats that we all have. That would be wonderful. So hope you are enjoying my content and enjoying today's class, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.